we'll deploy the flashing light, minus 20 degree point. Flashing light is deployed. I would like to take this time to say a little prayer. All the people, thank you for the privilege of being able to be in this position, be up in this wondrous place, doing all these startling, wondrous things that you've created. Be with all our families. Let them know that everything will be okay. We ask you in thy name. Amen. Flight Capcom, page 7. Go ahead, 7. This is Hawaii, region 11. Oh, Roger. I wonder if you'd relay to the Cape little situation I had happen, see what they think on it.
20 seconds. You can watch the countdown. 15 seconds. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Staging or booster engine shut off. We have a staging report. We have can confirm staging.
Roger, Hawaii. I wish we had Walk-On followed up the antenna. He's still having negative luck with all that, huh? Roger, we'll proceed as with the radar failure.
Separating from the spacecraft.
Okay, separating from the spacecraft at this time, Hawaii.
Okay, my feet are out. Okay, I put a little roll in, took it right out. Am I in your view, Jimbo? Okay, I'm coming over.
It looks beautiful.
I feel like $1 million.
Rendezvous was accomplished approximately 6 hours after the launch of Gemini 6.
We in 6 came within about a foot of Gemini 7. Shortly after that, Gemini 7 maintained station on us as well. But rendezvous and docking are feasible for manned crews.
Gemini 7, this is 6. If you could hold it in yaw for just a little while, we'll probably get in real close and get all these close shots of you.
Gemini 6, Hawaii, Capcom.
Doing all right?
How you doing?
Very good. We're getting a whole batch of movies this morning. Hawaii Capcom, Gemini 6.
Gemini 6, Hawaii, Capcom, go.
Roger, we asked for another orbit for photography. There seems to be no reason to race off map. Roger, we're pinning now. I can see us pinning something. Oh, we saw one flake that time, Brian. There's a whole lot coming by on right by my side. Probably the sun's not right for you, Wally. Oh, I see something now, yeah. Is that your water ball? I guess so. Yeah, I see it now.
Gemini 7, are you able to see in the windows of 6 very easily and vice versa?
Roger, 7 here.
Right.
For rendezvousing and doing all these good things.
Yeah. Right now, 6 is about 10 feet above and to the left of 7. We're just flying nose to nose, approximately 15 feet apart. selfie camera on at 6. Be the first acrobatic stunt in space.
Say again?
But the 4 days of Gemini 4 gave Command Pilot McDivitt an opportunity to live in space and plan work on a scale impossible before. His flight plan included 11 onboard experiments, medical, measurement, and photographic categories. This is an onboard camera, Gemini 2, looking through the spacecraft window.
Feeling great. How about you?
Gemini 4, Houston, Capcom.
Oh, Houston to my 4.
Roger, you started your rolling reentry.
There goes Florida. Is that Florida? I believe it is. See it on your side? Yeah. Roger, Kickapoo. We're just about ready to put the parachute up. Stand by. Okay, parachute's coming. There's the reef. There's the T-reef. And it's a good one, isn't it? There's the reef. Nobody can read me now, but does that parachute look great? You're not kidding.
The Agena target vehicle on top of the Atlas rocket out on pad 14 is getting final fueling, and that launch pad will be cleared shortly. The Agena is scheduled to lift off at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and achieve orbit in about 6 minutes.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have ignition.
There's ignition, and the Atlas rocket showers its pad with a bright burst of flames. It's a smooth flight. Everything is going as it should be. Typical present snakes and alligators out there are pretty good shaking, I would say. It's a smooth flight. She looks good.
Our flight plan was a relatively complicated one, and it depended very much on the launch of both vehicles occurring very precisely on time.
And the most single difficult part of today's mission has just been achieved. The Agena rocket, which misbehaved, malfunctioned last October 25th, is now working perfectly. The countdown proceeding smoothly at pad 19 for the scheduled 11:41 a.m. Eastern Time liftoff of the Gemini 8 spacecraft atop the Titan II rocket.
Periodically during the first orbit, we were informed as to the status of the Agena. When we found it was actually in precisely 160 nautical mile circular orbit, we were, of course, extremely relieved.
0. We have ignition. And we have a liftoff at 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Neil Armstrong reports the clock has started. Roll program is in, Armstrong says.
The launch vehicle performance was flawless. We had a slight amount of vibration during the early phases of the flight until we became supersonic, and the ride was extremely smooth from that time on.
As the mark, 50-second mark. Everything looks good. The distance now from the Cape about 4 miles. Altitude 24 miles. Flight director's advised his controllers to stand by for a status check. He's checking each one of them now. He's gotten a go from all positions here in the control center. Bill and Jim Lovell, our Capcom, has just advised Armstrong that he has a go from the ground.
The Gemini launch vehicle, however, put us in a very precise orbit, and no maneuver was required, with the exception of 5 foot per second maneuver used to separate from the second stage. The maneuver sequence involves 9 separate maneuvers to place the spacecraft in the best possible position for the terminal phase of the rendezvous.
Roger, do you have solid radar lock on with the Agena, over?
That's affirmative. We have solid radar lock. Just a second, I'll give you our current range.
Roger, thank you. Sounds good. Okay, we've got a visual on the Agena at 76 miles. Roger, understand. Visual, Agena 76 miles.
We proceeded in on the relative trajectory to the Agena until about 1.7 miles, at which time Neil began the manual visual braking phase.
We are looking at the left or command pilot's window as the station keeping exercise with Agena begins. Gemini 8 had no difficulty in maneuvering in the vicinity of the Agena.
Way to go, partner. You done it, boy. You done a good job. Do the thing. A bit of all right. Okay, the first thing we really have to do, platform parallelism, 650 to 710. It looks like at nominal time.
After station keeping for 35 minutes, Command Pilot Armstrong begins to move in closer to Agena, preparing his final docking approach. Both vehicles are traveling at approximately 17,500 miles per hour. The maximum velocity difference between the two vehicles at docking will be about 1 foot per second.
Okay, Gemini 8, we have TM solid. You're looking good on the ground. Go ahead and dock.
As you can see out my window, it was quite dark. We saw no electrical discharge or sparks at the time of contact as the spacecraft touched the whisker.
Flight, we are docked.
That was it. Two vehicles docked for the first time in space.
Roger, 8, reading you loud and clear. I have some information for you. Ready to copy? Stand by. If you run into trouble and the attitude control system of the Agena goes wild, just send in command 400 to turn it off and take control with the spacecraft. Did you copy that? Roger, we understand.
7 hours after liftoff and 27 minutes of normal docking, an excessive yaw and roll motion occurred. The crew punched up 400, but the trouble was not in the Agena.
Dave reported the spacecraft was diverging. The rates began to increase to the point where we felt the structural integrity of the combination was in jeopardy. We reduced the rates to a point where we felt the undocking could safely be performed without a chance of recontact between the vehicles, since there was rotation in essentially all directions. We wanted to be assured that we could get far enough around away from the Agena before some recontact between the vehicles was encountered.
The roll rate continued to build up, reaching about 1 revolution per second. Struggling to regain control, Mr. Armstrong was forced to fire the re-entry thrusters and gradually reasserted control over the spacecraft.
Gemini 8, CSQ Capcom, contact County Reed. We got serious problems here with the we're coupling end over end, but we're disengaged from the Agena.
CSQ flight?
Go ahead, Blaine.
Did he say he could not turn the Agena off?
No, he says he is separated from the Agena and he's in a roll and he can't stop it.
Once the re-entry thrusters are fired, there is the possibility of fuel leakage in orbit, leaking of fuel essential for re-entry.
Of course, we were extremely reluctant to give up the flight at that point, but the decision to re-enter in a condition like this with our re-entry control system activated is decided before flight, and seemed reasonable to agree with the ground recommendation at that point and prepare for a recovery.
The flight had been highly successful through 27 minutes of docking, but final action rests squarely on the shoulders of this man, the flight director. The NASA coordinator leans over toward the DOD console. The DOD manager immediately punches the button, which puts him in contact with Pacific Recovery Control, Hawaii. Hawaii alerts the captain of the Mason. He swings around and heads for 7-3, making 30 knots. 2 aircraft from Okinawa were originally assigned here, but 5 others were quickly alerted and added to the recovery team.
The retrofier, fortunately, was located close to Kano, Nigeria station, and we were able to hear the people in Houston counting down for retrofier. The ionized sheath of very high temperature gases coming off the spacecraft, the view of the spacecraft retro adapter burning up some several miles behind the spacecraft. I wish I'd had more time to look out during that time period. After we put our drogue chute out at 50,000 feet, Dave read out the latitude and longitude. We're very close to what we had expected.
Gemini 8 landed within 2 miles of the predicted impact point.
The landing sequence worked completely the way it was supposed to. The parachutes all worked fine. Splashed down.
Finally, over the horizon, after we had opened our hatches and had a good rest there, we saw the USS Mason coming full bore. And I'll bet that's the fastest that destroyer has ever traveled in its 22 years of life.
T-minus 15. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1.
And here goes Gemini 12. Beautiful sight. There aren't any words to describe this feeling during the launch. This tremendous power underneath you just propelling you. The thrill is just as great the second time as it was the first.
The Agena target vehicle is now beginning its second revolution. It is slightly more than 200 miles ahead of Gemini 11, but Gemini is catching up at some 500 miles an hour. And the crew sighted the target using a sextant telescope at 85 nautical miles.
Roger, Hawaii. I wish we had lock-on followed up the Agena.
The pilot bent over his charts, relaying distance and burn rates to the command pilot.
At 2 plus 05 plus 48.
12, Houston, 1 minute to LOS. You can go encoder on.
Roger.
Have fun.
Okay, the Gemini mission is a mission that for many of us has many firsts. One of the major items we intend to do is to prove out a new technique in rendezvous. We'll be rendezvousing during the third revolution as opposed to the fourth revolution in all previous missions. In addition, the flight crew has what they call the astronaut maneuvering unit that is retained in the adapter area of the Gemini spacecraft. The crew will don this particular maneuvering unit, and it will give him a propulsion capability using very small thrusters similar to the spacecraft capability to maneuver. We'll be moving into a higher orbit using this Agena capability and then coming back down to move into a orbit satisfactory for 2 re-rendezvous we'll be doing during the third day of the mission.
You might ask, why were we inserted in an orbit below the target? Well, this is the only manner in which we can actually catch up over a period of time. If we had, for instance, launched just a few seconds later or even minutes later, we would have been far enough behind so that it would have taken even a longer period of time in terms of revolutions or maybe even days to catch up with the target vehicle.
Dean made these movies. It's 1 frame a second. See that these are actually orange and amber, red, and green lights. This is at midnight over Australia as we're coming up to it. This is all we could see. Occasionally you will see the flashing arc lights. And now you can see the motion of the ATDA. There it was, just slowly rolling around. We moved in close and investigated the total situation we had, reported to Houston.
All 4 explosive bolts have fired, basically free from the ATDA, but just barely held on by those 4 little pyro wires there.
Roger.
Pyro wires on the strap are disconnected. And the whole thing is just loosely hanging on there. We're standing by for an unrigidized sequence. You could give it right now, it'd be great.
Roger. We'll have to wait till we get over Texas.
Here we're plunging down from above, and the ATDA is going across over the Indian Ocean. We've just passed the Sahara Desert. We're coming into less than 1,000 feet now.
There's no question that you're really moving at 18,000 miles an hour, and you almost get the feeling, as was mentioned earlier at previous times, that you're coming home. You get that feeling like that's re-entry right there.
Okay, again, this is some of the back part of the battery section, within about 4 or 5 inches. They're looking at the battery section. This is the antenna that transmitted information to the ground.
Those white stripes are actually silver tape And the ATDA was painted silver, and the shroud, of course, is white to give you an idea of the contrast. This shows the station keeping maneuver. What you do during station keeping is to look the Agena vehicle over very carefully. You inspect it from stem to stern to make sure that nothing has gone wrong during the boost phase. We've taken many pictures of this because it's quite a sight, quite a sight. That vehicle is 26 feet long.
The crew received a go for docking from the Coastal Sentry Quebec, a tracking ship stationed between the Philippines and Japan.
After station keeping, Gemini 10 closed and docked with a target vehicle, the second time this has been accomplished in manned space flight.
We were really glad to be there. We felt like we'd really arrived at home.
Now we show us coming up on Hawaii for the first primary propulsion system burn. Mike threw the switch, and a minute and 24 seconds later, boy, it was really something. And we were driven forward in the cockpit, and for 11 seconds, we got a tremendous thrill. The colors are just beautiful. Here you can see some of the sights we saw near apogee. And in the background, that landmass is Florida. And it isn't just Florida, it's Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. That's how far you can see up the coast.
On the second mission day, the command pilot performed 2 more Agena PPS burns to lower his orbit slightly below that of Agena 8.
We burned the Agena main engine 3 times, the first time for 14 seconds, the second time for 11, and then finally a short burn of 4 seconds, and in all cases the Agena performed just magnificently, a flawless performance.
Both crew members docked the spacecraft, the command pilot twice and the pilot twice. The crew's working day now came to an end, and they were in a sleep period. When they awoke and began their morning, it was just past midnight on the ground. The major event of the second day would be an extravehicular activity of Pilot Gordon. Everything was ready. The spacecraft hatch was opened at 24 hours, 2 minutes into the mission.
As in an earlier Gemini flight, extravehicular work proved exceedingly strenuous, and the pilot was able to complete only a portion of the assigned tasks.
Now, the eclipse had sort of been forgotten about since we had a launch delay of 2 days, but we were able to phase the spacecraft such that we could meet the umbra of the eclipse, the total eclipse, just at the right time. I had on my side a very almost opaque gold filter, which I could see the round circle of the sun, and it was my job to track the sun through this filter as we came up to the eclipse. I thought at first that we were really going to miss it because it appeared that the moon was a little bit lower than the sun and that we would never get a total eclipse. But as we approached this position and we approached the time of totality, suddenly the complete window became black, and in an impulse I ripped off the filter and looked out, and I could see a black disk against a sort of a black sky with a brilliant ring around it of the corona of the sun.
Let me have some. You got it. If you're hung on something out there. Got it. Good show.
Now, right near, he gives up trying to stay down on the Agena and finally floats up hanging on with his left hand and does the last part of the clamping down of the clamp, floating above the spacecraft.
The operation of a new environmental control system, which is called we call it chest pack, or the ELSS. We've never flown this chest pack before in actual flight. It's somewhat different, has longer capability than what Ed White flew on GT4. Now I'd like to take you out on the end of that 25-foot umbilical where I was, looking back at Tom. And this is one of the pictures that I took looking back at the spacecraft. We see the nose, the radar. I was probably good 15 to 20 feet in front of the spacecraft, and you get a fairly reasonable picture of the world and the horizon behind it.
I'm sure all of you that heard part of the air-to-ground in real time can probably imagine the amount of work that it was. Well, I was so single-minded at this time that I was going to get that tether on come hell or high water. And the tether was finally put in place.
Okay, I'm just testing here. It looks like I have a small tendency to float out, but very little. A beautiful view.
A major portion of this EVA was devoted to star photography, shooting so-called hot stars, much of whose light is in the ultraviolet spectrum.
In the day period between the two night periods, I used this to familiarize myself with the zero-G environment. What I was doing during this day period was recovering a micrometeoroid experiment that was attached on a retro adapter behind the cockpit. And I did this several times just to become familiar with this task. What I was trying to do was to store up a knowledge of how things behaved when I was on this short hose configuration, so that I could compare this with the situation that would exist on the second EVA, the umbilical EVA.
There was also preparation for the umbilical EVA of the following day. A portable handrail was installed from spacecraft hatch to the cone of the target docking adapter. It was left in position to be used Sunday. How was it going? Onboard cameras show us that it was going pretty well indeed. Pilot Aldrin moves out the hatch along the portable handrail, which he had installed during the stand-up EVA the day before.
Two flexible tethers that were attached to my parachute harness. I connected these hooks into two different rings. One of them was on the telescoping handrail that I had installed, and another one was on the docking cone of the Agena. And with this restraint system, I was able to completely ignore where my body was going, because I knew it wasn't going very far, and I was going to be able to devote my full effort to the work task that I had. As time moved on, I then started moving back toward the adapter and handed in the camera to Jim and picked up the camera that I was to use back in the adapter workstation. After establishing that these foot restraints were as good as we had hoped that they were going to be, I then took my foot out of these and did some work on the waist tethers back there.
He had performed 19 tasks, 12 at the Agena station, 7 at the adapter. A good EVA work session.
First, I think we learned the great value of a restraint system. The second lesson that I think we learned concerns the value of the underwater training that we had.
Gemini 12, Houston Capcom, 1 minute to LOS. New EVA record, beautiful job.
That new record was 2 hours, 9 minutes on umbilical EVA. On the next revolution, the hatch was opened briefly to jettison equipment associated with EVA. For the rest of the day, they worked on experiments. 11 were in the flight plan. But if the command pilot can position these two vehicles on the tether, the one lower, as the Agena is, and the other higher, as is Gemini 12, there will be a very slight difference in the gravitational pull of the Earth upon the two.
About this time, we had a little thruster problems, as you might know. Both 2 and 4 thrusters were out, and every time that I wanted to pitch up or yaw, I would roll. Well, our first attempt at attitude control was very poor, and we decided to leave attitude go and we'd just try translation. And as the daylight wore on and we got to nighttime, we heard Houston call and say, "You have 3 minutes tonight. Do you want to stay with the tether or don't you?" And after some discussion among us, we said, "We'll give it a try." So the next day, we gave it another try, brought it back up again. Buzz getting the slide rule out, making a few fast calculations. And it appeared to us now that our rates had indeed dampened. And there we were, 2 dead vehicles captured by gravity in a vertical position going around the Earth.
The two vehicles moved through space, maintaining their positions without use of thruster fuel, a technique important for future space missions. The next day was Monday, and it began for the crew at 1:15 a.m. over the Rosenaught Victor tracking ship. Not long after this, Gemini 12 received its flight update for a 60-1 recovery. It would now fly the full 4 days and come down in the primary recovery area in the western Atlantic.
Okay, everything's go up here and the world is round. I mean, it's spectacular. Bill, it's utterly fantastic. You wouldn't believe it.
Gemini 11 was now slightly more than 3 hours from retrofire. The onboard computer would bring the spacecraft in. The crew was quite busy completing outstanding experiments. A preliminary retrofire time of 94 hours was transmitted to them. Gemini 12 was making its last pass over the Canaries and the last pass of the Gemini program. The prime recovery ship, the USS Wasp, was on station some 600 miles east of Cape Kennedy as the retro rockets fired. The spacecraft is entering the Earth's atmosphere at 400,000 feet. We have a chance to make the last ride down with the crew, looking out the pilot's window.
We're coming home now. Retrofire has occurred. Buzz is taking some photographs out of the right window, and those occasional blips are the thrusters firing as we start our reentry.
Heat of reentry becomes intense. Particles flake off the ablative heat shield and fly onto the window.
This is the automatic phase of the reentry. The spacecraft is under the complete control of the computer. There was a period in there when we reached about 6 Gs that I was no longer able to keep the camera right up against the window. The spacecraft achieves its accuracy by rolling and changing the direction of the lift vector, and when it gets to the point where it thinks it's going to come very close to the target, we set up a constant roll rate.
Notice the window starting to bake and the film on the outer side starting to crackle.
We are midway across the continent, near the Mississippi Delta. The crew has been coming in for 27 minutes. Communications blackout is over.
Well, Houston, our data shows you're right in the money.
Roger. B-65L, repeat flight.
Roger.
Main parachute sighted, in full view of the Wasp.
They estimate the range of 5 miles to starboard. Estimating altitude 2,000 feet.
Our chute opened up just as advertised, and we stood by for a very mild landing.
Yeah, watch this.
Ooh.
Oh, it still hurts.
The Gemini 12 flight is officially over at 2:21 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It passes into history.
The whole world is waiting for you to say something. Have the world.
Oh, thank you, Admiral. I think Buzz and I are both happy to end the Gemini program with another success.
We tried real hard on our flight to please everybody, and I hope we've come halfway there. Thank you very much.
In the tradition of manned flights, the Gemini mission flag is lowered for the last time at the Manned Spacecraft Center. As it comes down slowly, we hear an echo of the words of the program manager. It is now time to go on to bigger things. And we will be able to go on with confidence because there was this program, and it was called Gemini.